Well, that was convenient because it's 7 o'clock. I welcome everyone to our regular meeting of Committee of the Whole. Committee of the Whole is at a time when we don't legislate or pass policies or pass legislation, but we have discussions in order to inform council and in terms of the direction and course we may want to take. So tonight I'm chairing it. Councillor Braithwaite, Hazel Braithwaite is downtown in an event representing Oak Bay. And we have two items on our agenda tonight. One is the issue of establishing a heritage conservation area. I welcome people here who've come to discuss and talk about that. We have a report before us on the issue, which has a recommendation that council, which will be something, if we decide to do that at this point, we would recommend to ourselves at our next legislative meeting, if I could refer to it as such, that at that council, that proposed heritage conservation area be referred to the council strategic priority sessions for consideration. The next session that has now been planned for that is January 13th, 2017, and that's where we will establish what the priorities are relative to one another in 2017 as well as 2018. And so the recommendation by our staff at this point is that this particular item be included. So tonight we have part of it is kind of learning what the requests are and what the application is and what it entails in a very high level. And I know the neighbors have put a lot of effort and diligence into putting a presentation for us tonight, which would give us that shape as to what it looks like. I know our staff has got a rough estimate, this very rough estimate as to how much this kind of project would cost, and I fully expect that if we go forward with this to the priority session, that come to the priority session we will have a much better idea of what the overall cost is, not only in relation to what, if any, consulting we require, but also staff resources and staff time. So with that, I see neighbor here, Dr. Prince is here joining us, and I take it you're going to be the spokesman and the presenter, and you have assistant. And so the idea tonight is not to drill down too far into the issue of an HCA, but to kind of inform us of where what the contours would look like and the context, and then see if council what their wishes are, but follow the recommendation is one option we have. Okay, so before you start there, I just wanted to also thank and recognize Caroline Duncan, who's our archivist, who stepped in tonight at the last minute, well, quite the last minute, but our deputy director of corporate services was unable to be here tonight. So thank you very much, Ms. Duncan, for agreeing to be the scribe. And so we have maybe, and what we wouldn't mind, if you wouldn't mind, Dr. Prince, is just to kind of identify yourself for the record. We know you're in Oak Bay, and then there will be a chance for others to add if there's other issues people want to bring to our attention. Okay, so welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for the record, Michael Prince, resident of Oak Bay on Prospect Place. So we have a presentation which is up on has been sent to council and staff, but for the interest of people who are perhaps going to watch this in the future on the webcast, and for those behind me, I will be reading some of the material out for the record on the slide. So, but thank you all for the opportunity to make this presentation tonight, which we've entitled "To Retain This Beauty." So it's our community presentation to council as committee of the whole for the creation of the Prospect Heritage Conservation Area. The next slide shows an aerial photograph of the particular neighborhood. This is circa 1950. So the area is spanning York Place, part of Oak Bay Avenue, through Prospect Place, Broome Road, San Carlos Avenue to Beach Drive, and includes Rattenbury's Beach and Haynes Park. Just to give a sense of where the area is located in Oak Bay, for those who aren't familiar with the area, the red dot is the area we're talking about. So welcome to the neighborhood, and get comfortable. For the next 15 minutes or so, I'll take you through a journey through this area. Let's start with a statement from Francis Rattenbury. Oak Bay District is one of the most lovely residential areas I have ever seen, and it is my desire to retain this beauty as far as possible. This is what Rattenbury foresaw as the prospects for this area. This, incidentally, is a letter that he posted to the Daily Colonist in 1913 in his campaign to run for Reeve that year. Heritage Conservation Area gives a municipality the authority to regulate the design of new construction and alterations to existing buildings and landscape features. HCAs have been around for 40 years in BC. There's scores of them in our province, and throughout the rest of the countries, there's hundreds and hundreds of them across the country. They offer a strong chance for future success of historic heritage and architectural legacy. Here you see Rattenbury's plan. This is Francis Rattenbury's vision of the future for this particular area. In 1898, Rattenbury and his partner John Tiarks, recognizing the potential value of the Oak Bay waterfront, purchased land extending from Oak Bay Avenue eastward to present-day San Carlos. You'll see on the map there it's referred to as Prospect Street, which was its original name, not Prospect Place. Property that would become part of Oak Bay in 1906. Over the next few years, construction of quality homes began in the area. This is 1605 York Place, called Briar Brae. It was built in 1904 by Rattenbury. And notice the view from this home, offering an extended outlook to the sea and how it's lovely incorporated with the topography. Next, 1535 Prospect Place. This is built in 1909 by two architects, D.C. Frame and Samuel McClure. The next is an ensemble of storybook houses. This is Patio Court, homes on San Carlos Avenue, built in 1927. Next, the Garden Mansions, built in 1912 at 1558 Beach Drive. Then we have Sandhurst, perhaps the oldest house in the area, 1898 at 1512 Beach Drive. Today, this neighborhood remains the most intact historic neighborhood in Oak Bay. With all its original buildings by significant architects, this area is visually and conceptually a whole. This is what makes it such a tremendous candidate for an HCA. This neighborhood has a significant cluster of heritage and historic buildings. These are the red dots. You're not seeing things. I put those up there. About 60% of the properties in the area are of historic or heritage character. There are, in addition, 4 registered heritage properties in the area, depicted by the green dots. It has the greatest concentration of heritage designated homes in the entire district, 11 of the 30 overall in Oak Bay. A major character defining element of this area is the representation of notable architects of importance at local, provincial, and national levels. These include, for example, Ralph Barrell, who designed 1621 Prospect Place, built in 1929. D.C. Frame, built 1535 Prospect Place with Samuel McClure, built in 1909. Percy Leonard James, built 1558 Beach Drive in 1912 and 1586 York Place in 1931. Then John Gerhard Tiarks, built 1512 Beach Drive in 1898. 1660 Prospect Place in 1899, and Annandale, 1595 York Place, built in 1897. Samuel McClure, British Columbia's best residential architect, according to many experts, added his work to 6 houses in the area, either in the form of original designs at 1538 Beach Drive, 1513 Prospect Place, 1580 York Place, 2390 Oak Bay Avenue, or additions to existing houses, 1525 Prospect Place and 1590 York Place. Carl B. Spurgeon, architect of the patio court cluster built in 1927, as well as other homes on Beach Drive and Oak Bay Avenue. Then Francis Rattenbury, or Rats, as he was called, both fondly and not so fondly. His own residence he built on Beach Drive, which is now the GNS campus. It was built in 1899, plus he had a hand in 4 other houses in the area, as well as the GNS campus with the boathouse and the coach house. Between 1899 and 1931, about 20 architecturally significant homes were added to these 5 streets, a grouping of architect-designed homes unparalleled in the municipality. And this will show you them all together. Beyond the buildings, part of the heritage value of any community are the stories of people. And this neighborhood is rich with tales of dramatic survivors, of local scandals, as well as notable accounts of honorable leaders, a distinguished knight, and other families. Did you know that a survivor from the Titanic, Mabel Fortune Driscoll, lived for many years at 1630 York Place? Died in 1968 at the age of 79. At the top of Prospect Place, a house designed by Samuel McClure was built for Florence Rattenbury, the first wife of Francis Rattenbury, thus providing her a close view of her former husband and his new wife in their residence and her former home at 1701 Beach Drive. Next, 1621 Prospect Place was built for one of James Dunmere's daughters, Kathleen, shown here on the right, and her husband. Her father had been Premier of British Columbia and then became later Lieutenant Governor. Her grandfather, of course, was Robert Dunsmuir of coaling fame and of the builder of Derrick Castle. Next, Sir Charles Hibbert Tupper. He's the one standing up there in that photo. A Minister of Justice and Attorney General for the Dominion of Canada, and the son of a Prime Minister, sitting down, and father of Confederation, Sir Charles Tupper. They hired Tiarks to build Annandale on York Place. The area has been an attraction for sightseers with tally-ho coach tours for more than a century. And that actually is the still operating company Tally-ho there. And from the archives, we came across this delightful report from the 1915 logbooks of the Oak Bay Police about an incident, a complaint lodged by the owner of 1558, Mr. Morris. Complaints of the Spielers in the Victoria Tally-hos making unnecessary noise while driving past his residence. He was, unfortunately, he heard uncomplimentary remarks about himself being made as the wise man from the East, and the East meant Ontario. Made his money from Ford cars. Yes, he was a major owner-operator of a Ford Motor Company. And the Jitney Bass Incubator, which I'm not quite sure what the hell that means, but maybe the archivist can help me on that. That was the logbook. The next day, dutifully, action taken by the constables. Empress Tally-hos was warned. Constables to note and report anything out of the ordinary that may be heard by the Spielers while driving by the district. Some things never seem to change, it seems. Here's the tour buses today, still going by 1558 Beach Drive and other properties in the area. Another defining element of the area is its rural nature. Natural landscape features and public spaces are integral elements. Here's Rattenbury's Beach, a historical photo, and with it an invitation to the beach. I think it's from 1905, so just before Oak Bay was incorporated. Things were done more formally those days. They got an invitation to even spend a day at the ocean front. And here's Rattenbury's Beach today. Still an important use for recreation, dog walkers, pleasure seekers, and just people who like a quiet stroll along the water. Beside it, of course, is Haynes Park, an important open space and land use in the area, and indeed for the entire municipality. And then there's Gibson House on, oh, we'll just enjoy that a bit more. There we go. Onwards back to York Place, Gibson House. It is one of the homes, and there's a few others in the area that are listed as properties of national historic importance. There's other charming little features like the Lich Gate. a small roof gateway leading, it was originally designed to the garden of Aaron House at 1580 York Place. And then there's the placing of homes in the area. Here's an example on Prospect Place of 1535, 1525, and 1513. A trio of arts and craft homes by architects Frame, Rattenbury, and McClure, nestled amongst rocky terrain, stone walls, and Gary Oaks, sort of iconic Oak Bay. Here's Oak Bay Avenue home designed by Spurgeon. It's in the area. Love the trees and shadows in that. Then there's the views of the sea, the offshore islands where Mary Todd, Chatham, and Discovery, and on a clear day, maybe not in that photo, but on a clear day, Mount Baker is visible. Next, Rockery is a notable landscape element in the area. Here, built in 1940, a home that was then redesigned in 1949 by architects John Wade and Charles D. Stockdale. They were known in those days as Victoria's modernist architects. This house on Prospect takes its place politely between two homes designed by Samuel McClure. Large sequoia trees in the area predate the development of this present neighborhood. Even though it's an old neighborhood, the trees, of course, are older. Deciduous tree canopies are apparent throughout the area, and significant trees contribute to the natural character of so many parts of Oak Bay, but here's this area. An important and very achievable goal of the HCA is to maintain this rural-like atmosphere. Along with that is the importance of wildlife and bird life habitat. Who says there's no nightlife in Oak Bay? Sorry, I couldn't resist that. Then there's gardens. These ones are shown at the end of York Place, showing ornamental mature shrubs, but still have a charm there. And among the natural features as well are undulating topography and bedrock outcroppings. Of course, there's the distinctive streetscapes as well to go with these natural elements. We have stunning examples of entrances and gates, ironwork there, chimneys and design details, roof lines and viewpoints. In this one, there is Mount Baker. Ironwork detail. In some places you might not expect it. Stone walls and traditional sidewalks with distinct patterns. That's York Place. Stone walls here, naturalized landscape with setbacks between roadways, properties, and buildings. And, of course, delightful entrances like this one to garden mansions. Now, with all this rich heritage, of course, the area has not stood still. There are newer homes that have been built, and mostly they've taken their place gently in the area. Here are some examples, Mr. Mayor, of contemporary homes built 25 to 40 years ago that are fitting, I believe, with a heritage conservation area. This is 1574 Prospect Place called the Barwin House, built in 1992. Really interesting architectural features there. Here's 1584 Prospect, built in 1976. 2380 Oak Bay Avenue, built in 1990. And 1606 Beach Drive Avenue, built in 1991. All different, but these are homes that we think show people can build new homes within an established neighborhood that are in context and in sympathy with designs and materials. The next few slides will show three properties on York Place. There's Gibson House, built in 1919 by Rattenbury with additions and contributions by McClure and Lort. Harmon House, 1931 design. This is 1586 York Place right next door, designed by James and Savage. And then down below it, this delightful tea house designed by Samuel McClure. The wooden lattice doors look out over a former tennis court, creating a distinct association with the lifestyles of early Oak Bay residents. This was originally built for the home that was originally on 1590 York Place that was moved and is now on Woodlawn Crescent. And this is breaking news. Just recently, Stuart Stark and Jim Wolfe, two well-known here, have determined that the house that's now on Woodlawn was designed by McClure. That's new facts. So part of doing HCA is the fun of discovering forgotten parts of our history and reconnecting to them. The owners of these three properties, which are currently registered, are interested in heritage designation if an HCA is established. And the owners are here this evening and would be happy to speak more about their interests on that later. So we're getting near the end. The time is now. we are at a pivotal point with formal policy aspirations and commitments on heritage that are set out in the OCP and the Oak Bay Heritage Plan. And from the OCP, of course, just a quote, there is a strong cultural heritage in Oak Bay which is greatly valued by its residents. Key heritage aspects of Oak Bay include the streetscapes and neighborhoods, historic buildings and structures, cultural and natural landscape features, and history. And I think this area fits all of those to a T. There's also, not to be alarmist, widespread concerns over the future of homes, not just in Oak Bay, but Victoria in general. And HCA can help to achieve environmental goals of sustainability by reducing demolition waste and the loss of old growth built structures. There's strong community interest in heritage. The first HCA in Oak Bay would be, I think, widely appreciated by people throughout the municipality and beyond. It would be seen as a concrete and positive commitment to retain this beauty, a place to be proud of and to connect and enjoy. And we are engaging in authentic grassroots participation. This is our website. There is extensive support among neighbors and other Oak Bay residents for protecting heritage homes, streetscapes, and associated natural elements. And we think we all benefit from protecting these features. They are the entire community. Advancing Oak Bay's heritage goals and HCA would be helped to conserve historical buildings and features, of course, but also to protect landscape and tree canopies. I think reinforcing things like an urban tree strategy. Promoting tourism, whether it's the tally-ho coaches or more modern forms of tourism to the municipality and to the village. As well as ensuring that any alterations and new development are in keeping with community heritage principles. Supporting community involvement and raising public awareness of the area's historical as well as its architectural characteristics. There's tremendous educational benefits, I think. You could see school tours and school projects, just the number of spin-offs from learning. Next slide. Our goal is to carry on in terms of preservation of our nature, preservation of our heritage, and ensuring any development done here is in keeping with the current established neighborhoods. A wonderful quote from you, Mr. Mayor, from just last month. So I thought, perfect timing. This is going into our presentation. We couldn't have said it better. Preservation of nature, preservation of heritage, and again, no one's against development or change, but to do it in a way that's in keeping with established properties. So some people worried that whether you'd like it in the presentation. I thought you would. Anyways, just as a reminder, this is the area that we're talking about in terms of the proposed heritage area. Without question, this area is an historic Oak Bay neighborhood, one that contributes a special sense of place and attachment to our district. There's significant community and social value found in the interaction of residents with their neighborhood, the pride in the significant heritage of this area, and a high level of involvement in protecting its features. And there's strong neighborhood support. 53 properties in the area that in that designated map area. We've reached out to almost every single one. There's a group of people that we can get into these numbers in more detail later if you'd like. But of the 45 property owners we've been able to talk to, we've had strong support from almost all of them. I know in the Director of Building and Planning's report, it mentions, or I think quoting me from a previous meeting where I said about 80% support. That's about right. If you take 43 out of 53, that gets you 81%, so we're on the same page there. But if you take the undecided unknown that we haven't been able to get a definitive response from, it bumps up to 95. So I'd say anywhere between 80 to 95%. We've got strong, widespread support, Mr. Mayor, throughout the area. So we humbly request, knowing that this is a committee of the whole and not council meeting, that council direct staff to retain a heritage consultant to carry out the work required to bring forward a recommendation to council specific to the creation of the Prospect Heritage Conservation Area. This proposed HCA is a vision and is a practical and we believe important community-based initiative that will enable the defining elements of this area, its historic homes, single-family residential nature, the adaptation of neighborhood development to the site's natural topography, the stone walls, the major trees, the other landscape features, and its delightfully rural character could all be retained for future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And what a wonderful presentation. Technically beautiful, and it really does show the importance of our natural heritage and our built heritage, and certainly the incredible setting along the beautiful waterfront there. So, and it's persuasive, absolutely. And I think you've laid out very clearly and carefully and in great detail the reasons for the preservation, and not the least of which is the stories that go along with some of them. So what we're going to do now is just to see if there's any questions from council of Dr. Prince, and then we'll see if there's anyone else who wants to add something new to what Dr. Prince has said, and then at that point we can have a discussion amongst ourselves. Go ahead, Councillor Ney, please.
Thank you very much, through you, Chair, Dr. Prince, for the presentation, and it was really moving to watch what you presented. I walk around that area all the time, and you've been able to spotlight and enhance what I take for granted every day, and it was very informative. I actually wasn't aware there was such a richness of designated heritage. So it was beautiful, and I agree, very compelling to move forward with this, in my view. I also want to compliment you and your neighbors for how you've come together as a group of people to do this, because it can't happen with one or two people. This can only happen if you've got the kind of support that you've been able to galvanize here with your neighbors. So I'm very excited about this moving forward. I do have a question, Mr. Mayor. I can feel you getting a little. Okay. So, my question actually has to do with the few people that were not supportive of this, as you've described. And I'm wondering, without, of course, divulging any, keeping things anonymous, what the nature of the reservations were.
Thank you. Good question. Some people, quite honestly, are undecided or unsure. They'd say, I'll wait and see. People who didn't want to sign a petition, or say, I don't really know that much about HCA, so I'll watch you and see, as you progress. And that's fair enough. There's a few people who actually, again, without divulging, hold jobs in the public service, who are unable to publicly support. They indicate privately their preferences, but there's a number of rentals where we've tried to find where the owners are. Some live in other provinces, and others. One house just recently sold right at the corner, right across from GNS, and so there's some shifting. So some of this is fluid in terms of undecided, and there's a few that are. We just haven't been able to get. We've contacted pretty well everybody. It's just a question of getting hearing back from people. So. And I know this is a process that will take through 2017, so there'll be plenty of opportunities for public hearings and other meetings. So, but I'm heartened by the group behind me here tonight that this enjoys strong interest. So,
thank you very much. We're looking for questions. All right, I don't see any. Thank you very much. And I think the reason there's no questions is very detailed and, as I said, persuasive, but also I think it answered all the questions that no doubt we had. And as you well know, this is something new to Oak Bay Council also, and it is a learning process for us, and we're learning along with the community. We're fortunate to have staff to provide advice as we go along. So thank you very much. So. Now, is there anyone who wishes to add anything new to what Dr. Prince has said? And I don't think, given the applause, I don't think you need to come up and just tell us you support it, because I think we can we can read that into why you're here and giving your support. So, but we're certainly prepared to hear your source. Okay, thank you very much. And very, what I'm going to ask you to do, though, sir, is I'm going to ask you to, because this is live streamed and they won't hear you over there. So if you could come to the microphone and give your name.
Okay.
And just pull the microphone close to you and give us your name, please.
Yes. Bob Wallace, 1584 Prospect Place. Mike, we've discussed the national society that has been set up, and I wondered if you'd give some fullness to that this is not something to reinvent this particular policy, that it is on, and we have been told or mentioned to us by some people that the council could do a straight C on it and therefore be quite not expensive, let's put it that way. So, Mike, you can add to that.
I think what Bob's referring to, and I know the planner and the director of building and planning are well aware of the national standards and guidelines for historic places in Canada. So City of Victoria has adopted those as informing their way of managing HCAs in that city and a number of other municipalities. I'm well aware, staff are already aware of this. I think we're all in favor of something that's streamlined, that's simple, that we don't need to reinvent wheels, that we can use, that are useful and practical. So I think that's what Bob's probably asking me to speak about.
And also too, you mentioned earlier, this is something that's been around for many decades. It's just new to many communities such as us, and we're grateful that you brought this to our attention. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Okay, thank you. If you could just turn off that microphone then, and so, okay, thank you. So, staff, we do have we have a staff recommendation which suggests that this go to the priorities session, which, as I mentioned before, is on January 13th. So perhaps before we discuss it, I'll see if there's anyone who wishes to make that motion for the recommendation.
So moved.
Seconded. And seconded. Okay, now let's see if there's any discussion on this issue. Go ahead, please, Councillor Murdoch.
Oh, I had a couple of questions for staff, actually, on this, just for clarification. In terms of the Heritage Conservation Area parameters, there's a number of ways of doing this. But just to be clear, moving this forward here essentially moves us to a process, not to determining that, because I think there is going to be some feedback from neighbors, and I think there's general support for this, but of course it doubles in the details in terms of what the parameters are, in terms of what controls are put on renovations, what controls are put on new builds, those sorts of things I think have to be worked out. So there's some good standards out there, but I think we have to also just make sure we're doing this and we will do that in a process that is that takes the whole neighborhood into account. So I just want to confirm that that is the case. If we move this forward and it gets approved at the priority session and budgeted, then this would be that would be the process we go through.
Yes, absolutely, and that's where some of the finer details would come out in the public consultation with the neighborhood and also the consultant that would be hired to assist us on moving this forward.
Okay, thank you. I also happened to notice that Rattenbury's beach party had a return chartered streetcar at 1 a.m. So are we going to return back to 1 a.m. Beach parties in the neighborhood? Is that the standard piece of this? Yeah, I can walk home now. I guess that's good. And yes, I think it's important to recognize there would be some concerns raised about the constraints, but those are all things to be dealt with. I also like the terminology, the radical modernists for that building. I think there's probably still some room for some of those around as well. But yeah, no, my general comments on this, it seems pretty simple. I think we have a official community plan, the official heritage plan, explicitly identifies HGA as tools to use. We have an application that's supported by the majority of residents. We have, it certainly meets the preliminary test for applicability based on that presentation, and is obviously really well supported by the Heritage Commission and Foundation. When it's come to those bodies, I can attest that it's been really well received by them. So I think we have no option but to deal with this application. Honestly, I appreciate it this next step of going to priorities is logical because we have to apply budget to it and so forth, and it will take staff time, so we have to make sure it may have to have ramifications on other projects, but I don't see any way we can't consider this application just because it is part of our process and it is part of our thing. So to my mind, this is more of a procedural process of how we go about it, but not a question of whether we do, because I don't think we have the right to refuse it, given it's in all of our official documentation. So I'm very happy to support this. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments before I call a question? Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I concur with Councillor Murdoch, especially with the very obvious support from the community. This is feeling a bit like a fait accompli, but of course we have the process that we have to move forward on. And I'm very interested and eager to support this moving forward. I do have a question for staff relating to process. On November 4th, if I remember correctly, we already had at least the first aspect of our strategic planning session, and in that at that meeting, we voted to put the HCA on a 2017-2018 sort of planning session, and by various other heritage improvements that was already added to a list. Could I get an idea as to sort of how that's going to move forward with respect to the input from this, and just a bit more detail if possible, since it sounds like we're already starting down this I don't want to call it a juggernaut, but a wonderful initiative. Thank you.
You're correct, Councillor Zelka. We did go through the first part of that process, and staff were tasked to bring sort of some formality to the priorities from council, and for council to reconsider that. We looked desperately for a time to get that done before the end of the year. We were not able to do that. Our facilitator was going to be away for a couple of weeks. So I believe that we are working on an early January process for the council priorities. So at that time, I think that's what the mayor was alluding to, that there are a number of priorities, and I think council just needs to be aware of the amount of projects and where those projects fit and how that actually impacts on staff resources as we move forward.
Councillor Zelka.
Follow-up thing. Thank you very much. So thank you. So the recommendation is to refer to strategic priority session. I believe we already had a strategic priority session. Is the next session really more of an estimates, where we're actually now, or we're actually making the final decisions and applying money? I was just wondering, like where does it fit in the estimates process, please?
One of the things what we didn't get to was the fine-tuning of the priorities. We had a big list. I think we all agreed we needed a small list. So the next step is to move from the long, I think we had a very big list. Then in the first session, we did move to a smaller list, or medium-sized list, and now we've got to move to a small list of ones that we're capable of doing, not only within our staff capacity, but within our budgetary restrictions. So it's a matter of balancing the shorter list, but I think we all agreed that the list wasn't short enough, and we couldn't accomplish all of the ones that we kind of settled on, and I can't remember how many there were. 10 stands out in my mind, 10 or 12, and so that's what we're going to try to achieve in early January.
Thank you very much. I know this is a new process. We're doing all this in public, and I really do appreciate getting a flavor for how we're figuring this out sort of together, moving forward on the priorities, moving to estimates, moving to the budget, moving into actual implementation. So thank you for clarifying that. I do also just want to add in a compliment. Thank you very much, not only for the presentation, but for helping to clarify and fill out really what heritage is sort of all about. It's not really a historical thing. I appreciated that you touched on, the actual physical aspects, the rocks, the trees, the views, the rural aspects, the gardens, the undulating topography, the various flavors, and the whole aspect that ties in with what we generally refer to very in a sterile way as streetscape. But it's living and breathing so beautifully in the Prospect HCA area. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Councillor Kirby, please.
I just wanted to echo my support, and I think I've privately expressed that, but I didn't get a chance at the last meeting to say anything. I just wanted to let everybody know that I am in favor of this approach, and obviously having endorsed our OCP in the last council, we saw this as an opportunity going forward, and so now that this has come from the community in a grassroots movement kind of way, it's fantastic, and it's wonderful that we're getting started already, and making this one of our many projects that our poor staff have to tackle. But we do have hope because after Christmas, like we've already put in the request last week to Santa. So the list was long, right? And you talked to him, right?
Yep. Santa mentioned the long list.
Yeah. So we're good.
That was on Twitter. Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. And
No. Yeah.
I thank you for your presentation. It was a fun trip down Prospect Lane, I guess, right?
Thank you. Councillor Nathan, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm certainly supportive of this, as I'm hearing my council colleagues or the committee members as well. But I just want to articulate my reason. Well, there's many reasons for supporting this, but as we all know, we do commit monies to heritage every year, and the work of the commission is committed and diligent, but it's arduous too. It's not easy expanding our heritage program in the community. It happens, but it kind of inches along. And this project, actually, it seems to me, will accelerate the heritage agenda. It's a big project. It's a chunk of change, but it's money well spent because it's going to increase our community awareness. It will be, it sets a precedent, and it's possible that there will be other projects in the future. But I think, and as a whole, it certainly will serve to really spotlight what heritage means in the community. So I'll certainly support this.
All right, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands. So the motion that we have before us is to move this to the next phase, as is indicated early in January, and then when we have an opportunity to examine it, and I think have some, by that time, have some more refined estimates of costs, and we can put all that in the hopper when our budget process will be in January. And what we're trying to do is align our priorities, our projects, and our budget. So there you go. I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. And I really thank you. And I know it's not just you, because you have all of those people behind you, but it does take a real effort by a number of people to come forward. And your presentation was excellent. You probably had a few opportunities to do that up at UVic before, so you probably a little bit of practice in giving lectures and talks. So, but what I think is important here is this is actually reminds me a little bit of what happened when our community came together to put a First Nations pole project, and it really was the community saying this is something that's of value to us, and I think that's what I hear from you, the small group, and the wider neighbors, that this is something of value and long-lasting value. So I really appreciate you coming forward and your, if I can call it the team, the group that's doing the heavy lifting to put something like this together. I know it's not easy, and I want to thank all the neighbors for coming out and supporting this. So our next topic is speed on roads. So what I'm going to do, assuming that you're not all that interested in speed on roads, is I'm going to just take a minute or two break while those who wish to go on to other aspects of tonight can do so. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you. We applaud you. Those are the speeders? Oh. All righty. I think what we're going to do is we're going to ask all the chatters to stand outside and then close the door so the talking can go on outside, please, and thank you. Okay. Well, and some of you were outside, and I welcome you to the inside. Thank you very much for coming. We have the next item on our agenda is the traffic speed study. And we have a report from Mr. Haran, our new Director of Engineering Services. I know this has been on our agenda for some time, as is set out in the report. Mr. Haran has a number of recommendations, and I'll just kind of review them one by one. That the Director of Engineering be directed to continue using the Transportation Association of Canada, known as TAC procedure for making recommendations on speed limits in the District of Oak Bay. B, that the District of Oak Bay adopt a 40 kilometers per hour speed zone strategy throughout the district. C, that the arterial roads in the District of Oak Bay, namely Henderson, Cedar Hill Cross, Fowl Bay, north of Oak Bay Avenue, and Cadborough Bay Road be posted 50 kilometers an hour speed limit, and that further, D, the Director of Engineering Services be directed to bring forward a plan to adopt these recommendations in a phased approach, including an implementation schedule, project budget, and outreach and public education. So that is the recommendation that's before us that we need to deal with. And I'm going to start by asking Mr. Haran just to give us a fairly high level. We've got your report, and so we know what's in it. You've detailed very nicely the historical context, and I know speed is often a concern for people who live in various parts of Oak Bay. And it's, I think, one of the things that I think you point out is from time to time there have been reactions to presentations by residents that have led over the many decades to speed limits being imposed here and there. And I think this is the first time in some years that, council has stepped back and looked at it in a more systemic way through our engineering department, as well as with the help of the consulting report. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and the high level, then we'll see if there's any questions to Mr. Haran. Then we'll see if there's anyone here who wishes to address anything in the report or other speeding issues, and then we'll bring it back to council for motions and discussions. Thank you. Mr. Haran, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the aim of the study was to conduct a rigorous analysis of the district speed limits and the limit setting process with the end state to move to a more consistent principles-based approach to setting speed limits in the district. So brought along two folks that I'd like to introduce, Mr. Jim Hemstock of Adept Transportation Solutions, the consultant that the district engaged to complete the study, and of course Richard Ding, our design engineer. The district design engineer is also here tonight to answer questions in support of the committee of the whole. So as staff, we consider the report from Adept Transportation to be thorough with sound recommendations that reflect the best practices of the traffic engineering community. The study also involved public consultation with Oak Bay residents, as well as stakeholder consultation with ICBC, Oak Bay Fire and Police, and BC Transit. So the speed limits and the recommendations we make are just one part of how we make an impact on safe streets and a vibrant community. So this is just one aspect of the overall plan. So we support the conclusions and the recommendations of the consultants' reports, and we're here now tonight to support the committee of the whole in understanding the issue and recommending a way ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rand. Let's see if there's any questions from council on the report or any of the recommendations. Go ahead, Councillor Kirby, please.
I just wondered if we'd considered using something other than the TAC for guidelines, because there is the NACTO guidelines, which North American guidelines that are a little more modern, a little more recent, and might just bring in that active transportation perspective a little bit more than the TAC guidelines. But I'm not sure. But That's just been my impression over the presentations we've had in the past.
Mr. Haran.
So through you, Chair, to Councillor Kirby, this might be a good time to actually bring up the Mr. Hemstock and Richard to the table, because I know that the report captures a bunch of different methodologies that could be used and have been used across North America, but the selection of TAC and the rationale for that is I don't quite have the answer off the top of my head.
Okay, that's a grand idea. Mr. Hepstock and Mr. Ding, or one or both, or we're not going to accept the neither. So if you, I'm going to ask you to come, and there's a little button on the microphone. This is, you may have been outside, but this is being televised and recorded and available through our archive. So you need to speak into the microphone so to get it recorded properly. Welcome, sir. You're with the Deputy Engineering. Introduce yourself, and please.
My name is Jim Hemstock. I'm a transportation engineer with ADEPT.
Welcome.
And my colleague and I, Wayne Gibson, worked on this study last year. We did a literature search, and we uncovered 4 processes to set speeds. NATCO doesn't have a process about speed setting. NATCO has design standards. And I think it leads to really the key question. If you want to slow the speeds down, in most cases, the speed limit is not the way to do it. It's the road design. And NATCO has excellent design standards.
Thank you. Right, if I could just put some context in it. Many years ago, 15 or so, following a conference that I'd been at, we invited a traffic calming expert from Vancouver to join us. And that's one of the things that he outlined. And he actually outlined some of the design ways that were available. We really haven't used a lot of them. I think we used, speaking of Prospect Place, there's a little pinch point in Prospect Place which was used and designed in order to deal with the speed, as opposed to just putting up a sign that says don't speed, which is, as you've pointed out, and I think we probably all know intuitively, has some effect, but not always the effect that it's desired. So it certainly is something that we've also seen in adjoining communities. Okay. This is a good place to be right now because it's very rainy outside by the sounds of it. But we've seen in adjoining communities where they use mini or micro roundabouts and smaller lanes. So those are the design functions that achieve the end. So okay, thank you. Any follow-up questions for that, Councillor Kirby?
No, I think that kind of addresses the one thing I guess, and also indirectly the issue I had that I would hope sort of that we would look at this through the complete streets lens, and so I'm assuming that's what you've done, but not being able to apply NACDO doesn't mean that you didn't look at it through that lens. So can you just sort of reassure me that that was part of the process? Thank you.
Let's start with you, and then we'll go to Mr. Haran too. Or do you want to do it the other way around? Yeah, you go ahead, and because it's what your background work was, and if you can address that if you're able.
Yeah, so I think a key point is that the recommendation is for 40 kilometers per hour, lower speed, on 98% of the streets. On the major corridors, there's a number of other things. For safety, we really want to see people driving the same speed. So if you have a speed limit which is very different from how people like to drive, you get fast and slow, you get conflict, theoretically you get more accidents. If you slow the main bus routes down, you slow transit down. They had a case on Esquimalt Road where their operating costs went up 10 to 15% because of the speed limit. So where transit goes greenhouse gases, goes the mode split. And I think we should also remember that the streets are very safe. The accident rates are really quite low.
Good, thank you for that. Mr. Horan, is there something you wanted to add?
Yes, through you, Chair, to Councillor Kirby. I recognize it's a good question because the speed study as it was done is very, it's a narrow focus to answer the question about speed limits, what they should be, and how we should set them. But that leaves some questions unanswered from members of the community about what streets should look like and what decisions we need to make, where staff and the district should focus efforts in terms of improvements and things like that. And that falls under the Complete Streets umbrella, which it was brought forward about a year ago, but incompletely. So that's also on my plate of things to bring forward is a more thorough follow-up discussion on Complete Streets and how we're intending to do that here in the district.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Murdoch, and then Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm not sure who to direct this question to, but one of the things I noted, both the fire and police comments in the report requested that they would have a chance for feedback on the findings. Have they had a chance to do that yet, or is that still a process?
Mr. Horan, can you enlighten us?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Murdoch, yes, both Oak Bay Fire and police have read the draft report, so a year ago, and then through the spring as we're finalizing the recommendations.
Thank you.
So,
go ahead.
may I take through you, Chair, may I take that then that they're in agreement or supportive of the recommendations in the report, or did they raise any concerns?
So my recollection, and my team will be able to back me up on this one if I've got it right. There's some questions of implementation, so how to roll it out, and there will be definitely some work that we need to do from the engineering service side with fire and police as we put together the plan, assuming that the recommendation is supported.
If I could add on that point, one of the issues is how we mesh into the Motor Vehicle Act and their regulations. That particular piece of legislation, as I read it, has the default speed in a municipality is 50. And you may recall that Victoria, I think, tried to bring a Union British Columbia municipality motion, and essentially the province is not going to change that section. So we will have to look at ways to implement a if we go down this road, a community-wide 40 without having thousands and thousands of signs. So but that's an implementation issue. So okay, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so
ahead,
that
please.
leads to my follow-up actually. Because in the D of the 4 recommendations here, that staff be directed to bring forward a plan to adopt. One of the things that it refers to in a phased approach, and because the Motor Vehicle Act does limit us in our ability to enforce 40 kilometers an hour, I mean, really this is in many ways an educational process, right? If we put this forward and we come forward, we're going to be requesting people drive 40, but unless we want to sign things, we're not going to be enforcing probably. Is that correct? Is that a reasonable interpretation?
Well, I think that's something we probably need some legal advice on,
Right.
Not only from the police, but their views, but also perhaps some other legal input.
Sure. Even if
And I'd love to give you the that legal input tonight, but I don't have a retainer, so I'm not.
No, I think my only, I'll just raise as a thought on this, that the phased approach, whatever that means, I believe this, because we're looking at this, I think the beauty of the recommendation here is that it's municipal wide, it's very straightforward, it's easy to understand. If you're on these designated roads, it's 50, otherwise it's 40. Phasing, to my mind, we've got to be very careful about that, and that we don't distill that message, that simple message down to the public, because that's the most, that's that reason that caught my eye. So I'll just.
I think that's a good point, and of course we all know that if you're driving up Cadbury Road, goes from at some points at 50, then it goes to 40, and then you're through a school zone unless you're in the evening, and then you're back to 40, and then sometimes it goes back up and down, and I think the point that you make, Councillor Murdoch's an excellent one. This has the benefit of simplicity and consistency. Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you, Chair. No, I agree that simplicity is very important, and I also agree how the aspect of how the speed guidelines inform the design standards inform the speed guidelines. When speaking of Cadboro Bay, sort of heading up further north, where it technically goes to, I think, 50, is effectively almost a 70 zone, it seems at times. I'm not pointing any fingers, but by the golf course, it does seem to be quite an incredibly wide road there, and the temptation from the design aspect is a mixed metaphor, shall we say, in terms of work that I think we need to do in that area, the royal we need to do. So I do want to ask a few questions, please. With respect to Victoria, changing their arterials to 40 kilometers per hour in a general sense, I think they did that last mandate. They did bump up against this provincial Motor Vehicle Act issue. Other provinces do allow municipalities to set the standard speed limit for the municipality with a big sign as you pass into the municipality, but unfortunately British Columbia doesn't yet.
We used to. Yep.
With respect to that, I think it might be wise for us, or maybe myself, to consider bringing forward a motion for AVICC and UBCM to try again. So I'll make a note of that as something that maybe we could help our Director of Engineering Services in implementation. So I wanted to ask, with respect to Victoria's 40 kilometers arterials coming into Oak Bay, will our switch to 50 impact any of their 40s with respect to possibly confusing our drivers?
I heard someone say it's a good question, so which means there may not be a good answer right now, but we will certainly look into that. Mr. Ding, if you're able to shed some light on that, just pull that microphone a little closer to you, please.
Yes, let's say, for example, 4th Street, there, or Bay Street, the current, they change to 40 kilometer per hour. If they enter into Oak Bay, like Cadboro Bay, will increase to 50. But remember that what happened in Victoria, they have changed their speed limit for a year. Now they're reviewing the practice. And at the beginning, I'm not saying City Victoria, don't want to put them on the spotlight, but some cities change their arterial lower speed. The compliance is really low. They have to come back and increase the speed limit. So there may be a change in the future on the other side of the Cadboro Bay. But our recommendation of 50 on Cadboro Bay is based on enforcement, safety, and all the procedures we followed by TAC. Yeah.
Thank you, if I may, Chair,
Thank
to
you.
continue. So I appreciate your comments on that, and I imagine with respect to other initiatives such as active transportation and design aspects that might come in to possibly help some of the concerned areas that I'm aware of, for example, at Bowker and Cadboro Bay. That seems to be a bit of a funny zone through there as people sort of go by Oak Bay Lodge. But I imagine you're on that in terms of some of the design concerns. But I also heard you say that you wanted it to be 50 through that corner, for example.
Go ahead, Mr. Horan, please.
So through the chair to Councillor Zelka, the approach that we're trying to take by making these recommendations is that we focus on what the streets look like rather than what the speed limits are to influence drivers. So if we have recommendations and have plans about changing what streets look like, those are tougher to make because they usually involve higher costs, they involve more debate, they involve design and then construction, but those will have an impact on the drivers in the long run. So that is the focus of our recommendations here, to shift away from what has at times in the past happened where there's a thought for some that changing the speed limits would have an impact, and that ends up taking us away from making a real impact, and that's the focus of our recommendation.
A final supplement, if I may?
Go ahead.
Well, I very much appreciate and support the general guideline to move to 40 kilometers per hour on 98% of our streets. One of my first impressions of Oak Bay, if I can share a few more than a decade ago, was an Oak Bay policeman at the time showed me how to zoom into South Oak Bay through Victoria because it was 50. and avoid the 30 zone just south of Oak Bay Avenue. And I thought, this is weird, where you go from 40 to 50 and then possibly down to 30 and then 40 over there. It was it still seems odd to me. So I really appreciate the design intent, if I will, of a standardized approach to make it easier and less confusing for the new folks coming into our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Nay, then, and then we'll come back to Councillor Kirby a second time. Thank you.
Thank you very much through you, Chair. I like the recommendations, as others have said, the simplicity and the clarity, and I like your guidance to us about the messaging we can use, 40K when in Oak Bay. It's a nice, simple, straightforward thing that we can use to message. But I do have a question. I never thought the deer issue would come into this topic, but there you go. It's sitting there. So I'm going to ask the question. With regards to the 50K speed limits that you're recommending on the main arterials, one of them is Cabra Bay, where apparently we have a number of deer conflicts. I don't know the exact number. Whether I need to know, I'm not sure right now. But in your report, you've assessed that particular stretch of road by the Uplands Golf Course, and you've said that the wildlife conflicts are sporadic, which they are, and that they're rare, and that drivers wouldn't respond to a lower speed limit, and that they would probably continue the higher one in any case. And you've also suggested that the deer population be dealt with on a regional basis, which we're kind of struggling to have that done. But remedies aside, I'm just wondering if you could speak to your analysis and the conclusions you came to about retaining the 50 kilometer speed limit on that stretch of road where I would have to ask staff, but my understanding is that's where we have the highest number of traffic conflicts with deer. I don't know if you knew or aware of the numbers, but that's my understanding.
Are you able to deal with that question? If so, go ahead, please.
So the question of deer has been researched widely across North America and around the world. And the difficulty with the regulations, if people see a sign and they don't see the situation that's causing the sign, they tend to ignore it. And with deer, it tends to be at dusk. It tends to be 2 months in the year. And the research has been pretty clear that fencing is about the only way you're going to make an impact. You can put up deer signs. There's no research that show they're effective at all. So fencing along the golf course would be probably a $200,000 solution. It's perhaps not practical, but we're not aware of any other solution unless there's a region-wide approach to reduce the population.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question.
Sure,
Mr.
absolutely.
Mayor. Yeah, I'm just wondering, the idea of getting drivers to stick with the 40K, you're saying is not tenable. But let's say you could. Let's say there was a hyped up, enforcement of it. But would that 40K reduce the likelihood of deer conflicts? Are you aware of what the number is that you need to get, the speed you need to get at to mitigate the number of deer collisions?
Through the chair, I don't think there is a magic number, but slower is better. So if that were the key goal, then you would just want to slow the road down. And there's various ways to do it. in that section of road, one of the things that we mentioned more or less in passing was that if we had cycle tracks and boulevards, you could squeeze the road and make it look smaller, and that would slow traffic down. But to my knowledge, that's about the only
Thank
approach.
you. I think Councillor Kirby, I think, was next, please.
Yep.
Thank you.
I just had a follow-up question about Cabra Bay Road. When you mentioned the transition from Victoria Fort Street into Oak Bay, into as it becomes Cabra Bay Road, and then immediately is a school zone, and then is 40 for the turn, and then it's the people speed up and go down the hill, and then it's another school zone, and there's a very dangerous crosswalk in that hill that I'm very concerned about and hope we're in the next term going to address. But then it goes down to 40, or goes back up to 40, and then it goes, as you climb the hill and the road widens, then it becomes 50 all the way along that the golf course. And I'm wondering, for that whole stretch where there's the schools and the crosswalks and there's far more people around because we've got the high school and the neighborhood learning center and the Oak Bay Rec Center and several businesses and shops where people walk, could we keep that at 40 and maybe because of the deer issue, keep it 40 the whole stretch of Cabra Bay Road? I wouldn't object to that, but I think like increasing it to 50 and then having in that zone where there are schools and lots of children, and particularly now that the neighborhood learning center houses the child care center and all of the programming for young children, that those crosswalks are a little more used more frequently by younger children. And I just would love to see that we kind of keep that zone at a lower speed limit, because I just feel like if we raise that to 50, I think it's would cause some issues.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a comment rather than a question, because anything's possible if we say it is as council. So, and if this motion goes to the next stage, then we will see reports coming back, and I think that's the time to discuss that. But we also have to strike that balance between, on the one hand, we're saying we're going to use TAC, and on the other hand, TAC guidelines.
TAC. Oh, I thought you said THC.
No.
Concerned.
No. If we all did that, we'd all slow down quite a bit. But that's another issue. It's much too dangerous, though. But using the TAC on the one hand, and then overlaying it with politics and our own opinions on the other hand. So, which may bring us back to where we've been before, where we apparently don't want to go back to. So, but I think that discussion and debate, I think, is when we go to the next stage. Okay. So that's why I'm not going to ask you to comment on that, because it's more of an opinion. So I think I've got Councillor Croft, and back to Zelka, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I like the recommendations, the overall recommendations, and I'm looking forward to exactly what you just said there is the next go-around, is that this is a very broad stroke presentation right here, and there's a lot of work to be done to actually bring it into a program. I like the idea of the cycle lanes up on Cabra Bay. There's a plan that's been proposed to have cycle lanes up on that end of Cabra Bay by the golf course anyway, and that would do a whole lot of slowing that down and making it appear as though it's slower, so people aren't doing that 60 to 70. But I think those kinds of questions will come out when we actually see what the overall design is. I see our friends from Granite Street that have a great concern about what's going on at their corner, and we do have a letter that we did receive about the work that goes on at Granite Street and the definition of roads and things. And I constantly get confused of what's an arterial, what's a major, what's a minor, what's a tourist route. So Beach Drive is a special road, right? So it has its own definition, and we're all learning these things. So I'm looking forward to the working this out. Thank you.
Okay, for the next stage, Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll admit for myself personally, if Victoria is no longer 50 kilometers an hour, I'll have less incentive to go down Granite. So I appreciate the fact that things are being leveled out. The TAC guidelines, they're an objective assessment based on engineering factors. So the politics have been taken out of it. The emotionality has been taken out of it. It's just based on strictly as presented facts, in terms of to a large extent. So I understand what the guidelines are saying, and of course I have to agree with our mayor that felt ultimately we make the final decision. But I do have to agree with Councillor Kirby with respect to Cadbro Bay in that lower area by the school. During school hours, yeah, it drops to 30, but outside of school hours, there's still a lot of kids around there, and I could be convinced to later or at the appropriate time to change the 50 on Cadbro Bay to start maybe a bit further, maybe at Estevan, north of Estevan, as opposed to at Foul Bay. So we'll see how that progresses, and maybe some of the recommendations coming back from staff with respect to what's being presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murdoch again? Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I guess a couple of things. One, someone wiser than me once said, it may be hard to get people in Oak Bay to speed up to 40 kilometers an hour on all these roads. The report is excellent, and I just want to commend staff and consultants, Mr. Hemstock here for this. I find it very interesting to see how little the speeds changed with changing the speed limits. Granite Street is a great example where it went up when we reduced the speed limit. I thought was a fantastic example of that. The reason I'm very supportive of the recommendations here, and I just have to say this because it was raised, the City of Victoria's approach, where politicians essentially dictated, oh, well, I got this gut feel that this should be slower, has resulted in people cutting down back roads because all the back roads are still 50. It's just resulted in traffic mayhem. It's affected the public transit negatively and increased carbon emissions and done all these negative impacts just because there's a political will to try and impact. I don't want to do that. I really, really strongly feel that as a group, if we can agree that this is going to be done with engineering standards and just moved it forward in that way, that's the right way forward for us. It takes us out of this. Of course, there's always an appeal to this body, but I think we have to be very careful not to stick our fingers in, because I think that's how we go from 40 to 35 to 30 to 40, I get to 20. It's responding to things. I think this is a very good positive effect. I hate the proliferation of differing speed limits. And I also think that we have to be very careful. I think this is largely identified in here. If we set the speed limits in a way that is not reasonable, right? If we say, well, we want it to be, there's some comments made that it should all be 30, people aren't going to drive it. And I think as soon as we start setting limits in a way that people see as unreasonable, they're going to ignore all the speed limits. And I think so we have to find that kind of balance that people can see the logic of it and use the tools that have been identified in terms of traffic calming and so forth to actually to affect change. So I'm very comfortable with this. I just want to say that I always appreciate very fulsome reports that have the detailed information and the background. I really appreciated the information on all the different alternate methods of using for setting speed limits. It was very informative and very interesting to get that background. And it certainly gave me a comfort level just because I've heard there are better systems out there to kind of see what they are and have a chance to compare them as part of this. So are we going to have, I guess, input from the public still, but barring any radical change, I'd be prepared to make a motion on this.
Okay, I'm just going to hold on for that thought. So thank you very much. What we're going to just ask you is to return to your original positions. And I'm going to see if anyone wishes to address us on this particular topic. If so, come forward. State your name. Press the button so the red light comes on first, then state your name and your community, please. And I think there is a little sign-in sheet there which you can also take advantage of. Thank you.
Right. Diana Butler, 2149 Granite Street.
Welcome.
Hi. I just want to say this is refreshing. We, residents on Granite Street and Victoria and Hampshire and Brighton, have been in front of council for over a decade asking for some improvements in our street. What happened was we got 40K. It was reduced from 50 to 40, but then Foul Bay Road is 30. Victoria wasn't changed, it's 50, and Hampshire is 50, and it's just a mess. So I'm really encouraged by the recommendations to simplify this, to make it more coherent. And I think certainly our experience is that you can reduce the speed limit on Granite, and it was just basically ignored. There's no enforcement for one thing. And I guess, you know, the speed limit actually went up. What is, and I was very encouraged tonight, and I hope that you will continue to pursue this, and we have argued this for a long time, that the surrounding land uses, the fact that we're 1 block south of the village, at Oak Bay Avenue is closed constantly. It used to be about 4 times a year. Now it's about 18 to 20 sometimes. Encourages traffic on our street. We get a lot of truck traffic. And, you know, I think the street is wide in certain places and very narrow. It's actually narrowest at its very busiest part, which is up by Foul Bay Road. We have major parking issues as well. So I'm hoping that you will go from get the speed limit thing done and then certainly start to focus on the design of some very problematical streets in this community. And Granite Street and its surrounds is one of those. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to address us? Yes, come on forward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of committee, my name is Jack Basie, and I live at 2241 Brighton. And I really commend the Director of Engineering Services for his report. I've sent him back an email. I don't have any problem with the report. I think it's a well-written report, sir. But what isn't there, and it's always a question, and Diana's alluded to it, is the issue of cut-through, using Granite, using Hampshire, using Brighton, which is really not a designed street to carry a large amount of arterial type traffic. And so that's the main concern we have, is we have made presentations to council, and I was under the impression that at some point a full traffic management study for the area immediately south of Oak Bay Avenue was going to be undertaken by council. I did send an email back to the Director of Engineering Services, and I alluded to that. So that's the main concern. It's not speed. From my point of view, speaking personally, it's the amount of cut-through traffic, that frequent closures of Oak Bay Avenue, which has now allowed people to know the quick route to get from Foul Bay, avoid Oak Bay Avenue with all the crosswalks, and then go along Granite, come down Hampshire, and cut through Brighton and onto Monterey or St. Patrick, and use those streets to get home. So that's what I'm awaiting. What will happen with this council? Are they going to look at a traffic management study for Oak Bay Avenue area south? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Basie. Anyone else wishes to address us, please? All right. If you could just hit that little red button to close that off, that would be great. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think at this point, I think we're ready to, I'm ready to entertain a motion with respect to this matter.
I'll move the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Moved and seconded. Discussion.
I just want to point out that I think that we're going to, after tonight's meeting, we're going to see a dramatic reduction in speed, because I've just been alerted that that sound we heard was slush and snow. So it's sticking. And so there will be a dramatic reduction in speed right after this meeting, because we are making a good decision here tonight. Just kidding.
And if it freezes, there'll be another dramatic turn. All right. Any other? Okay, go ahead, please, Councillor Zelka.
Oh, I apologize for leaving my microphone on. So a question, Chair, specifically to you. You mentioned that you didn't want to entertain any modifications to this with respect to, for example, Cadbro Bay modifying it. You're saying that this might come up at a future time. I wasn't quite sure what you were referring to, sir.
Yes. It's the last bit of the motion reads that the Director Services be directed to bring forward a plan to adopt the above recommendation in a phased approach, including implementation schedule, budget, and public education. So as part of that plan, when it comes forward, I think that's the time to make any specific modifications.
Oh.
Not tonight, because we don't have the streets designated except at a very high level.
Okay.
So
Well,
nothing's going to happen until that plan comes forward. There's not going to be any changes, in other words, until that plan comes forward. And I think that's the time when we have it in front of us, and we'll see if there is a desire to change the plan.
Thank you for that clarification, and it seems reasonable. I also concur with the comments from Councillor Murdoch about the phase concern and possible confusion. So whether it ends up being a plunked in and one big plan, I'm looking forward to seeing what that plan looks like. I do note that in the motion, it's very specific about which parts of Foul Bay Road, but it's not very specific about Cadborough Bay Road. So maybe, again, look forward to seeing what the details look like. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishes to address? All right, so then I'm going to call the question, and that is it was moved that the recommendation proceed to council. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. And I don't think we need to, do we need to receive the other documents? No. Thank you very much, because we've dealt with that item. So thank you very much to the people who've come to address us on this issue.
Move adjournment.
And moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. And now we're going to brave the elements.